morning, everybody, and thank you very much for joining the NPOR thematic seminar. I'm Vlasis Konom, I'm the Managing Director of ICT, whom we are coordinating with my team the project NPOR. It's a Horizon 2020 program on combating energy poverty in the private rented sector. The purpose of this seminar today is to discuss with some experts who have carried out studies on how can we quantify and how we can actually depict on a national level to what extent the split incentive is a real problem or not. The reason for doing that is that without having this knowledge, often the policies, the energy efficiency policies and the subsidies for energy efficiency do not work out appropriately in several cases in the countries. This who we are, it's a consortium from consisting of several organizations in several countries in the EU, and we are testing 10 policies for the private rented sector. You know that the legislation now is getting in the Fit for 55 package, and the REPowerEU is getting more complicated with the new directives coming up. And so the issue of understanding what the extent of the problems in the private rented sector are will determine a lot the success or not of the national policies to achieve the targets under the new directives. The split incentive, actually, you know, that's the dilemma on who owns and who rents and who pays for the investment. This is quite a well-documented, at least in theory, issue. And here what we are going to do is move one step further and discuss about the practice and how can we really find out how to do it. There is, of course, this split in the sense that if you have, for instance, if you rent a house and the occupant pays for the energy use, often we have this under insulation, the less efficient appliance, and there is optimal effort to reduce energy use, and quite the opposite direction when it comes on who pays. Now, I will not speak a lot. The presenters today are 4 experts, two from the NPOR consortium, Mr. Christos Tourkolias from CRES in Greece, who is they have carried out a study at the national level, and they will show us how we did and what the results are. Anamari Majdandžić from DOR, from the agency in Croatia, again partners in NPOR, who will discuss the split incentive in Croatia and the fee-based tenancy, so it's a specific rule on how it could be applied. Dr. Hongguang Nie from the Changchun University of Science and Technology on an article they have written on the split incentive effects for the adoption of energy-saving measures on the household sector in the Western Europe. They've carried out an analysis in some countries, and that's how we will see how to do it. And Dr. Lucie Maruejols from Department of Agricultural Economics in the University of Göttingen on Canada. So we see we have quite a diverse set of countries and experiences. And the reason for carrying out the seminar is, as we said, primarily to help member states and to help practitioners and to help also the national energy agencies to understand how to carry out studies on the split incentive. We know it is there, but very few have quantified it. And that's the reason it's more to help you out on seeing what questions to ask, to whom to ask, how to analyze the data, and what actual examples you can get, and then we can move on to a better design of the policies. I would give the floor directly to Christos Tourkolias from CRES to present us the case study from Greece. Christos, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Vlasis. Good morning to everyone. My name is Christos Tourkolias. I'm Energy Policy Analyst at CRES, and as CRES, which is we support technically the Ministry of Environment and Energy, I would like to present you a study that was occurred by the Ministry in order to identify potential barriers in regards to the split incentive problem in Greece. I suppose that you can see my screen. Okay.
Yes,
so in our attempt to harmonize the EED into the national level, according to the provisions of Article 19 of the EED, a study should be conducted in order to identify potential barriers. So the Ministry of Environment and Energy decided to organize a study, to conduct a study aiming at the mapping of potential regulatory and non-regulatory barriers. Moreover, the ministry wanted to assess the barriers that were identified by this mapping exercise, and of course to draft specific policies and measures in order to tackle and to address these identified barriers. We supported the ministry in order to find the appropriate, let's say, approach in order to conduct the study, and we introduced 3 different pillars. First of all, we decided to assess the available data from the household budget survey, which is
sorry to interrupt you 1
yes.
second. The slides are not changing. Maybe you need to press the... Yes, now it goes. Okay.
Okay, yes. I will not use the full screen mode because it's not working. I think that's okay. You can see my slide.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. As I mentioned, 3 different pillars in this implemented approach were introduced. First of all, we decided to analyze the collected data within the framework of the Household Budget Survey. It's a survey which is conducted on an annual basis by the Hellenic Statistical Authority and collects data from the households. Then we decided to conduct a survey, both in tenants and landlords, in order to understand their perception toward this problem. And finally, we decided to conduct some structural interviews with key stakeholders so as to elicit from them and the main aspects of this problem and potential policies and measures. First of all, the analysis of the household budget survey results lead us to the conclusion that there is a continuous decrease of the expenses totally as a households in order to renovate and to improve the efficiency in general, including energy efficiency of the buildings. As you can see, the average expenses were reduced from more than 1,000 euros in 2018 to approximately 60 in 2020. The main reason for this is, of course, the economic recession of 2012. As you can see, there is a sharp decrease until from 2008 to 2014, while a temporary increase was occurred until 2017, and then there was a stabilization in the average expenses from 2018 to 2020. Simultaneously, and the number of households was reduced, depicting that the renovation of the building is not a priority from the households. Moreover, we analyzed the respective figures both for landlords and tenants, and the main conclusion was that the landlords are more willing to renovate their houses compared to the tenants with few expenses, as depicted both from the average expenses for the renovation of the buildings and the number of the households. So yes, the tenants do not have any incentive to renovate their dwellings. So only the landlords are willing and are able to renovate their houses. Moreover, we designed and conducted a survey both in tenants and landlords. The survey was conducted within November and December of 2021. We developed a structured questionnaire with similar questions, but we asked from the landlords who rent their buildings and from tenants to complete this questionnaire. We decided to use similar questions so as to be easy to compare their responses. And the survey was conducted through social media channels of Meta and Viber. Finally, we managed to collect 136 questionnaires, 89 from landlords who rent their buildings and 47 from tenants. So as to have an idea about the representativeness of the sample, I have to say that 100 is the threshold of a sample so as to be representative, with confidence level at 95% and confidence interval at 10%. In this slide, you can see the main questions that were used in this questionnaire. And firstly, we wanted to investigate if the rental property has already been renovated, including information about who covered the implementation cost, either the landlord or the tenant, the willingness to improve the energy efficiency of the rental house in the coming year, including the main reason for this decision, the willingness to share the cost of the energy renovation, again, identify the main drivers for this. Then we assessed the possibility the tenants to cover the entire cost of the upgrade, provided that the amount will be deducted from the rent until the end of depreciation of the implemented energy efficiency interventions, to determine the maximum amount which can be provided and how this will be allocated between landlords and tenants, to evaluate the effectiveness of various proposed policy measures, to assess the potential role and the potential barrier which is triggered by the General Assembly in their apartment buildings during the implementation of energy efficiency measures. And finally, we collect some information about the characteristics of the buildings and the various demographic and socioeconomic information of the participants. In this slide, very briefly, I will present you the main results. First of all, for the case of landlords, the majority of them, higher than 50%, say that the main reason for implementing energy efficiency measures is obviously to increase the value of the property and the assets, but approximately 40% say that another important reason is to increase the rent or to be easier to rent the building, and of course to reduce the maintenance cost. In regards to the effectiveness of the policy measures, it's very interesting to see that the vast majority of the landlords say that the most effective measures is to provide financial assistance to landlords, while the almost half of the respondents say that, and the other examined policy measures, such as to provide financial assistance to tenants, the application of MEPs, the obligation to extend the duration of the existing lease in the case that the tenant will cover the cost, and the potential prohibition of the rent for this case are also effective policy measures. Moreover, only 8% of the landlords supported the tenant participation in the cost of the energy upgrade. So generally, they were unwilling tenants to, with the possibility the tenants to contribute to the financing of these energy efficiency interventions, while only 12% of the landlords supported the proposal for the tenant to cover the full cost of the upgrade, provided that the amount will be deducted from the rent. From tenants' point of view, the main reason for the innovation is obviously to reduce the energy cost and to improve the thermal comfort within the houses, and to a lesser extent to reduce the maintenance cost. One main difference with the landlords is the fact that the tenants assess as effective all the examined policy measures, and to provide financial assistance to landlords and to tenants also, and the other, let's say, regulatory measures in regards to the extension of the duration of the existing lease or to prohibit the rent increase or MEPs, while 87% of the landlords support the tenants' participation in the cost of the energy upgrade. So almost all landlords wanted to participate in the financial intervention, depicting a contradiction with the landlord's perspective, who say that we prefer to finance without tenants' participation. And almost half of the landlords supported the proposal for the tenants to cover the full cost of the upgrade, provided that the amount will be deducted from the rent. So, as you can see, this was a first, let's say, a first indication that in Greece we have problem with the split incentives, because the dilemma that was presented by Vlasis was confirmed by the outcomes of this survey. Within the framework of the third pillar of this methodology, we organized structured interviews with key stakeholders coming from a representative of landlords, POMIDA Association, an association that represents both tenants and landlords, ECPISO. We participated as a project in order to provide valuable insights about how it is feasible to combat energy poverty in private rented sector. A colleague from UNESCO participated in this interview in order to present the market perspective. And of course, we had the participation on two property management companies, Prodea and Noval, mainly to explore the problem in the tertiary sector. The main discussed issues was to identify the main drivers for the energy renovation, how the energy upgrade cost can be allocated between landlords and tenants, to evaluate the proposal, the tenant to cover the total cost of the interventions, provided that this amount will be deducted from the rent, to identify potential problem in Greece, to assess the effectiveness of the policy measures, and to assess the potential barriers. Again, a structural questionnaire was developed in order to facilitate the interview and, of course, to ensure that comparative result will be resulted by these interviews. So, to conclude, the outcomes of this study confirmed that in Greece we have problem with the split incentives, and there is obviously a lack of an officially established framework for addressing split incentive problems. Generally, there is a lack of culture and lack of awareness and understanding, so it is difficult to reach a consensus for this contradiction that was confirmed. And as I presented earlier, previously, there is a continuous reduction of the renovation expenses. There is a different perspective between landlords and tenants about who has to finance the energy efficiency interventions. There are completely different drivers for their implementation. It was interesting that MEPS was assessed generally as a very effective measure, but it is obvious that a well-balanced mixture of policies and measures must be initiated in order to address effectively this problem. And finally, it is important to calculate the real benefits both for landlords and tenants for the whole duration of the lease. And it's crucial to involve both landlords and tenants in the design of the required policies and measures, because it will be easier to solve this problem with the different perception. Finally, it is important to tackle the obstacles for reaching consent during the general assembly of the apartment buildings. Thank you very much. I am at your disposal for any question.
Thank you, Christos. Really enlightening, and we see how this can be done in practice, and it's good you get some numbers. I hope this can also influence the new policies you have in mind for the 2024, now 2030 period. Let's move on then to the next presentation from Anamari. For those of you that you might have any questions on the practical aspects or whatever type of questions you might have on the presentation, just use the Q&A session, it's easier. So Anamari, the floor is yours. Let's see how you quantify that from the perspective of Croatia.
Thank you, Vlasis. I will present more like what NGO sector has done and what actually then ministry, when they heard about what we have done with all the 4 surveys, it brings us a really good data to create maybe some measures and good policy after this. So I present you the split initiatives in Croatia and term of rebase tenancy. First of all, I just say that in Croatia, when you are looking at the data, it says that 90% of Croatians are owners of their apartment. But when you dig in those data, you realize that most of us are saying like, yes, I own, like if you are in 30s, like, yeah, I own my house. Then when you actually ask people, but who is the owner of the deed of the households, then you realize that most of the data that's showing 90% actually fall down around 50-60% that actually people who are on the deed of the household. So this 19-10% was something that we want to dig in more and to see what is going on with so-called free-based tenancy, meaning of always living two separate family in one dwellings, meaning that mostly it's like family-owned household that was divided in two flats, and I don't know, your parents living in one flat and you are living above with your family, but you are not owner of the household, but you are not also paying the rent. So you are like in the middle. But looking at the data also about how the energy poor indicators like areas on utility bills or inability to keep your house warm in social housing, we can see that also creation in private rented sectors are really bad data, especially that, like, let's say about 50% of people cannot pay their bills, and they have a problem with keeping the warmth of their household, and like 70% of that. Also, social housing is something that you are not your also owner. You can see the data are even worse than in a private rent. And keeping in mind that social housing is something that also it's subsidized by the government, and the bills are subsidized by the government, and still citizens say that they have problem with keeping the warm their house or paying the bills. So this is kind of situation that we start. And when we got this project about private renting sector, it was really hard for us in Croatia to see what is going on and what we need to do, what measures we need to propose for when you have like in data 10% of people that are in tenant. So we have synergies with 4 other projects: Powerpool, Empowerment, EPA, and Bush Eco project. That in the start we decided to do surveys for this project, and we have conducted around 997 household visits in 2 years from all these projects, and we kind of mapped area around 1 million people in Croatia. So if you know that like 4 million people are living, 1 million is really good map data for us. And what we have done in all of these projects, we create the surveys, but we put that question about ownerships of the households. Are you owner? Are you tenant? And even we let in depth and said, if you are tenant, but are you paying the rent, or you are living rent free? Are you living in social housing? So we divide that kind of idea of the ownership and tenant. So what we have done in Bush Eco area, we complete 152 surveys. In Powerpool project, we visit city of Križevci and 257 household visit. Empowerment projects visit city of Zadar, 200 direct household visit, and EPAH technical assistant for municipalities, city of Zagreb got it, and we visit 388 direct households. And from these 4 surveys that we have done, we actually was part of creating program for combating energy poverty in city of Zagreb. So actually really this data create first program in Croatia for combating energy poverty. So how it's been? I'll just show you like few examples because we have done 4 surveys. We don't have time to do more in depth. So I just just show you some kind of interesting graphs for municipality of Buševac. It's around less than 1,000 people living there. So it's more rural area, more family houses oriented. So we can't expect to have like 0 data on tenants, but maybe on joint households, like people living together, especially family. And it showed us in 157, we got 5 households that are said that they are not owner, that they are tenant. And it kind of complied with maybe the first data that 10% people in are owner, are tenant. And what those graphs are shown that this Buševac area is not, it's actually really good standing area, and difficulty paying heating bills for owner tenant was not the problem. Maybe just like 20 people said that they had citizens that they had problem. Difficulty paying the water bills was also not like almost the same people who said that they had problem with paying the heating bills. They had problem with paying the water bills, and they also have problem with paying electrical bills, but not in the area like that was 20% in, as I showed in the graph before, in the presentation before. So for the heating reduction, actually we can see that also the tenant was that 5 of them that we got in this survey, they said that one of them has problem with heating reduction, that he needs to heat more, but he could not afford it. But while in the owner sector, maybe just 16 of them said that they had problems. So like maybe 20% of the people are having problem with heating reduction. And mind that this survey was conducted just before the energy crisis, and this survey was not energy poverty target survey. It was more like about renewables, and it was our first. We have this kind of question of the owners, and we wanted to analyze it looking like with NPOR view of the owner tenant. These surveys also in Buševec, as I said, it was rich area. We asked them if they invest in some renewables in their households, and you can see in the tenant that the only one that was invested by the landlords was in biomass, other one not invested. But if you see the owners, you can see that a lot of them invest in biomass because it's continental Croatia, so the heating is the problem and the bills are here problem. But you can see that there was solar thermal system, photovoltaic system investment, but not that so much. But still, this is area of 1,000 people. We gather 152 household visits. We almost visit 30% of those areas. I think it would be better regarding the financial state of this part of Croatia that we have done the survey. After that, we have done the survey in the city of Križevci, and actually it was the first like really energy poor household visit with survey. And this map that we put it here, I want just to show you how the joint households function. When you ask people if you are owner of the households, you can see the data are rising if you have more age. So if you are older, you become more owner than the household when you are in your 20s or 30s. But also, I live in a property that I'm not paying the fee, meaning that you live in joint households. You can also see that it starts from the 30s and always keep the same flat line, meaning that this is kind of lock-in effect for like 30s, 40s, 50s. There is no kind of actually it grows with your ages. And also what was the problem Croatia that we mapped is living in the property, but you are not owning, meaning that if there is a legal issue with your rent, with your asset, meaning that you cannot even apply to programs for grants for energy renovations. So what is we also done in power-poor city of Križevci is that we also ask them about their feeling of the how they sit with, let's say, near the window in the winter. And actually a lot of them said that they have problem with the colder, and not just in the tenant sector that you can see in this let's say last 3 columns, but also the owners have problem with cold and with other parts. And this is actually done survey during the energy crisis, so this is really up-to-date data. And regarding Buševec and Križevci that are also kind of in the north part of Croatia that could be considered the richer part of the Croatia, city of Križevci shows more data that are energy poor households, that they had problem and that they do need some kind of measures, especially in regarding the energy efficiency. In empowerment project, that was Mediterranean area, so we kind of moved from the continental Croatia to Mediterranean area. We also have done the energy poor households visit, and it was really in-depth household visit with 30-minute survey. And what we also asked them about social welfare system. We also asked other 2 areas that I presented earlier, but there was like maybe 1 or 2 people that were beneficiaries of social welfare system. In city of Zagreb, you can see that in the owner sector, in the rented sector, the ones that are not paying the fee, but they are also, and in social apartment, we have like people who are part of social beneficiary system. And those actually, when you ask them of difficult paying bills, you can see how they increase difficulties with the renting sector and the social apartment sector. So this is kind of data that's showing you that there is a problem in rented sector, but there is also a problem in owner sector. You can see the first column that a lot of people, like in the end, like 70% people say that they have sometimes difficulties, big difficulties, or mostly or very big difficulties to pay their bills. So this is kind of city of Zadar that show us that Mediterranean area has more problem than continental area, especially because they don't install the heating system, but also with the cooling and summer heat problem with summer energy poverty. The last survey that we have done was few months ago. It's the city of Zagreb, and it was also energy poor household visit. It was similar to Zadar survey, so we kind of after first, second, third, and fourth survey got idea what we want to ask them, and we kind of polished our survey. So for the city of Zagreb, I just want to we really put question about in the last 12 months that energy crisis was hit. Do you have problem with paying your utility bills? And we asked and we analyzed it through the lens of and per idea of are you owner and are you a tenant? And we can see that there is problem with paying at least once, sometimes twice with paying the electricity or water or heating. And this is something that actually prompt the city of Zagreb to create program for combating energy poverty and include like measures for dealing with this problem. But city of Zagreb is the richest part of Croatia, and we asked them if they install some kind of energy efficiency measures. And you can see that even in the rented sector, they invest, landlords invest the energy efficiency measures. But if you go to renewable graph and see, but if you invest like in new ones, like photovoltaic system or heat pump, we can see that in rented sector, as Buševec, as the first area, biomass was the only thing that was invested, but other not just that were not invested for a tenant, but you can see that owners didn't invest anything, and considering that was Croatian richest part of Croatia, it's really demoralizing to see that kind of data. And for the kind of conclusion, I just want to say that while we are doing these surveys, we have done the meetings with Target and React group meetings that we have like live testimony, what is happening on the area. Most of them say that problem with multi-apartment buildings where most renters are, it's gathering 50% of the communal signatures to do the renovation, and not only just to do renovation by your own money, but even if the state is opening the public calls, they not and subsidize you with 40, 60, 70%. They are still not in. They don't get into it, especially if the multi-apartment buildings are most owned by the landlords. They don't see the value in doing the renovation because they don't live that. Also, there's split initiatives between the apartments that are owned by landlords and apartments that are lived by the people in. People who are living in those apartments are more keen to do renovation, and they are losing because if they are less than 50% of them in the multi-apartment buildings, they cannot go to the renovation. Also lack of the funds, because even if there is a public call in 60 seconds, or let's say 300 million kunas go in let's say 16 seconds for multi-apartment buildings, but also this kind of small group of unrelegated market with the private rented sector, unresolved property legally relations that was mapped by us during these surveys was something that proposed us to create some reports that will be presented to the ministry because they ask us about this data, and this is something that will get us idea how to create measures. So this is for me for now, and we can, if there is question, we can go this later or classes. You decide.
Yeah. Thank you, Anamari. So you can see this is also a different approach on how we can measure. It's on a very local level, and the complexity of the problem starts that if you speak about national surveys like Christos, you get a different type of sampling. While here is more indirect up to small city level, and you can get, of course, a different insight. And perhaps the policies can be this way more locally better targeted.
Yes.
But still, the problems do remain on the same. Even if we see that we have a better insight, more or less, I guess in Greece, it's the same issues on the financing part and why people don't invest in the end and why these programs are appealing. There is interest, but when it comes to the point of payment, people are more reluctant to do so. Let's go then to the next presentation. As I said, you can still use the Q&A if you have any questions. It's more of methodology and results. We go to the presentation of Hongguang. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. I will share my PowerPoint.
Yes, we can see your screen. Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Hongguang Nie. I'm from China. I work in Changchun University of Science and Technology. Today, I want to present a paper named Split Incentive Effects on the Adoption of Technical and Behavior and Saving Measures in the household sector in Western Europe. With an average 30% of total consumption in developed countries, the residential sector has become one of the largest energy consuming sectors. And nearly half of all residential dwellings are rental properties in Europe.
Hongguang, sorry for interrupting. Can you please, we don't see the change of the slides.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, okay, great.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Different incentive between owner and occupants of dwellings can cause the overconsumption of energy. And energy waste caused by this type of EU-directed incentives might be expected to be quite huge, originating from both an underinvestment in technical and saving measures and a low frequency of daily energy saving behaviors. So we do this study to quantify the magnitude of split incentive problems in 3 Western European countries, including Netherlands, Germany, and Belgium. And we focus on technical and behavior and saving measures. According to the conceptual framework, and we divided people occupants according to the whether invest in energy efficient technology. So we divided the occupants into 2 groups: occupants who can invest in EE technology and occupants who can't invest in EE technology. And then we also divided occupants into 2 groups according to whether they pay the annual bill. Occupants who pay annual bill and occupants don't pay annual bill. So then we get 4 cases. In the first case, occupants can invest in EE technology and they pay annual bill. So normally they own the dwellings, so there is no split incentives. And in other cases, there are investment split incentives or behavior split incentives. So in this study, we just measure the difference between the homeowner and the renters, because the renters have split incentive problems, but the homeowner, they don't have this kind of problem. The optimal decision of energy saving measures was modeled as a function of whether the household members own the dwelling. And other factors involve a variety of household characteristics, household members' willingness to pay extra for greenness, environmental concerns, and environmental beliefs. We use the average marginal effect to further investigate the split incentive effects, which indicated the difference between homeowners and renters regarding the probability of adopting the energy-saving measures. A positive AME means that relative to renters, homeowners were more likely to adopt energy-saving measures. And for certain energy-saving measures, the magnitude of AME could provide a qualitative measurement of split incentive effect. So we use AME to measure the split incentive. And survey and data. In this study, we conduct a survey in the Netherlands and Germany and Belgium. And in the Netherlands, we collect 428 samples. And from Germany and Belgium, we collect 400 samples. And the questionnaire including information about demographic factors and basic information, and adoption of household and saving measures of response. And also, we ask the motivation of adopting and saving measures. In this table, we show the summary statistics of socio-economic and environmental psychological variables. Here, including like basic information like gender, age, education, income, employed, whether employed, and family numbers, children, if they have small children, and also dwelling type. Yeah. And also we ask the willingness to pay extra for greenness, environmental concern, and environmental beliefs. And this we will use them as control variables. And this is the main result of adoption of energy-saving measures by category of owners and renters. So we asked 4 questions about technical energy-saving measures, including improve house insulation, use solar panels, or use efficient boiler, or change to use LED. Yeah, and we also ask 4 questions about behavior energy-saving measures, such as thermostat to 20 degrees or below, turn the heat down at night, close the windows when the heating is running, and turn off lights in empty rooms. And we can see that the mean of adoption of energy-saving measures for owner is significantly higher than that for renters. And we further calculate the average marginal effect of ownership on energy-saving measures, and we find that the AME is a little it's insufficient. Yeah, and you know, the positive AME represents that the homeowners are more likely to adopt energy-saving measures. And for technical energy-saving measures, the number is really larger than the behavior energy-saving measures. And it can show that for technical energy-saving measures, the split incentive is really large. But it's also happened to the behavior and saving measures. Okay, we further introduce some controlling variables like household characteristic, willingness to pay extra for greenness, and environmental issues. And when we introduce the controlling variable one by one, we found that the result changed little. Yeah, so we can see that the original result is is not influenced a lot by the controlling variables. and people may want to say that maybe model influence the result, or the country, maybe they have different results. So we do a robustness check, and we use logic model instead of per bit model, and also excluding Belgium, Germany, and the Netherlands represented. And excluding apartments, excluding high-income people, excluding high education people, and also excluding household with small children. And we can see that even we do this kind of change, the result is similar to original result. So we can see that our result can pass the robustness check. Okay, so now I want to conclude the study. For technical and saving measures, homeowners were 20, 25, 10, 13, 15% more likely to adopt and saving measures of thermal insulation, solar panels, efficient boilers, and LED. And for behavior and saving measures, homeowners were 1% more likely to adopt and saving measures of setting the thermostat to 20% or below, turning the heat down at night, closing the windows when the heating is running, and turning off lights in empty rooms. Yeah. And the split incentive effect were very robust across different countries when we controlled for plausible alternative specifications, including household characteristic, willingness to pay extra for greenness, and environmental issues. Okay, this is a study from us. Thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, we can discuss later.
Thank you very much, Hongguang. It's interesting, and you see that the numbers are quite diverse in all the studies, which makes it even, a lot to ask about on then which method should be the best, or if we could use combinations of methods, or how to use, let's say, each one in the specific national context. The formulas you presented are very interesting. I think we can start using similar ideas in the national level, and also in the national studies to be carried out, also within the program, and or if we manage to at some point. Thank you very much for that. And we move on then to the last presentation from Lucie Maruejols on the Canadian multifamily dwellings. So Lucie, the floor is yours.
Okay. All right. So good morning, everyone. My name is Lucie, and I'm from the University of Göttingen. This study was conducted when I was working at the University of Alberta for the CBDAC, which is the Canadian Building, Energy and Use Data and Analysis Center. And it was done in collaboration with my colleague, Denise Young. So the motivation for this study, and then this is the second slide, was to ask who pays the bill in tenant and landlord arrangement, and what is the effect on this on energy consumption and energy efficiency behavior. So on the first table here, we can see there is a variety of arrangement, and then we've split our data between panel A and panel B. So panel A is rental units. It's where dwellings are occupied by tenants, right? And then we see that in some cases, tenants pay for electricity, in others they pay for natural gas, and in some other cases, it's the landlord that pay for natural gas or electricity. And then what's interesting in this data here is that in panel B, we have owner-occupied dwellings. So those are people who own their own apartment or their dwellings, but in some cases, they actually do not pay for natural gas and oil. And that's when those fees are included in their condo fees. And so we have a dual source of split incentive here, both for tenants and also, but as well when people own their own dwellings. So what we wanted to see is the effect of those arrangements on both energy consumption and efficiency behavior. So the data was collected nationally in 2006 for Canada, and it deals only with these multifamily dwellings. And we've separated the analysis between low-rise apartment, And then the other category is duplex, doubles, row houses, terraces, and that would be the next slide. What is excluded is high-rise building and then buildings built before 1920, just because in the Canadian context, there are not many of those buildings that are built at this time. Okay, if we move to slide 4. Could we move to slide 4?
We are in slide 4
yeah.
now.
All right, so I guess I'm not seeing this. Yep, all right. So what you can see here is a summary statistics for these two types of arrangements. So when we're going to move on directly to the second set of column here, where rented. So that's where the split incentive problem is most obvious. And then whenever you see data in bold, is data that matches the expectation that there is agency problem and that there is split incentive, where people who do not pay their bills, right, when utilities are included in the rent, in the last column here, they consume more energy than the other one. So that's the first couple of columns there. And they also increase the temperature. So the temperature is set at higher degrees than when they actually have to pay for their own electricity and heat. We've also looked at equipment. So the equipment tends to be older and then less energy efficient when utilities are included in the rent. And it's the same that we find with a set of environmentally friendly behavior, so energy saving behavior, where we see that people do not tend to adopt those behavior when their utilities are included in the rent. So this is all very nice and matching with expectations. So we have a first idea here. But if we move to the next slide, number 5, there are some limitation in using just those summary statistics. The first one is that this energy consumption, which was the first row, is often imputed by the surveyors, right? It's not something that has been actually measured, but something that has been estimated. So it's a bit problematic to work with that. The other problem that we have here is that there are other characteristics that will influence this energy consumption and behavior, such as household income, household size, whether people stayed at home during the day or not. And we want to make sure that we control for all these other factors before we can make an estimation and before we can quantify these split incentives. And that's why we move to econometric models. All right, so on slide 6, we've got an overview of the econometric models. So we will stay away from trying to see the effect on energy consumption. Rather, we will look at the temperature setting by the dwelling occupants. So we look at day, evening, and nighttime temperature settings. And the second thing that we do is look at the effect of split incentives on the set of energy saving behaviors. We have two types of specifications, so two models. In the first one, we put all data together. So it's pool data. We have all the households that live in multifamily dwellings together. We identify who, we use the variables to identify whether or not occupants pay for the bill and whether those dwellings are occupied by owner or tenant, right? So the two sources of split incentives that we could find earlier. In the second specification, what we want to do is to allow for characteristics to vary whether the occupant pays for the bill or not, right? So the other characteristics. So we have a split sample. We run on 2 different samples. One of the sample will be for dwellings that pay for their bill, and the other one will be for dwellings where occupants do not pay for their bills. In order to control for the fact that tenants may select one apartment rather than another one because they have preference for whether or not they have to pay their bills by themselves, we use this technique here, which is called the Heckman two-step selectivity estimation, and it controls for this decision of the household before entering into a renting agreement of their preferences for paying or not paying their own bills, right? So this identify this behavior. And of course, we use a set of controls. All right, so moving on to the next slide, I won't focus too much on results, but rather on how to interpret them and how we build those models. So on the first column here on the left-hand side, the left-hand side, yes, you can see all the controls. So we control for the decade of construction of the dwelling. We control for the main source of heating. We control for the type of apartment and its equipment. For the location, because Canada is a very cold country, but so some areas are not so cold, so the heating degree days measure the severity of the weather outside. We also control for energy prices, and we use interaction terms here between who pays for the bill and energy prices to allow for different behavior and different responses. And then finally, we make sure that we control for household characteristics. So whether there is someone at home during the day, what is the size of the households, are there children or not, etc. And of course, the household income. So the first column here, if we look at the results, is our pooled data. So that was the first specification. And then how to interpret the results here, we would look at the effect of this first row here, whether when the heat is not paid by the occupant, we can see that this has a positive effect on our outcome, and our outcome variable is the last one here. It's the daytime temperature setting in the dwelling. So here we can tell that when we take all households together, the fact of not paying your bill tends to increase the temperature setting during the day. And we find similar results for evening and nighttime temperatures. The second and the third column, they reflect our split sample model. And so this is the model where only those observations where the occupant pays for the bill is selected, and whereas the last column is only those observations when somebody else pays for the bill that is selected. So the first row is not there. And this allows that we have different effect. For example, the household characteristics might affect differently the daily temperature and other things. So here what we see is the difference here, that when electricity is not paid by the occupant in both cases, right, then we have increase of daily temperature. But we can see that so the effect would be different between the two samples. What this also allows us to do is to look at, for example, the severity of the weather. So that would be in the middle here on the location characteristics. You can see that when the occupant pays for their own bill, then they tend to be more responsive to cold weather outside, and then to be to be more careful of not putting the heat too high when they have to pay for their own electricity. All right, so that brings me to a conclusion in the last slide. I think the first few points we're familiar with that already. So when people do not pay for their own electricity or heat, it might affect their energy use and how high they set the temperature or what type of behavior they adopt. And then we find here in our data with our models that there is a problem of split incentives, and that households who do not pay directly for heat opt for increased thermal comfort. Maybe a few notes of methodologies. I think that's what we're concerned here with, is first of all that summary statistics have limitation. And the first one is that we can't control for all the other factors that influence energy use. So it's good to move on to econometrics model. The second case that in surveys, energy use might be imputed and estimated rather than measured. And then when we move on to econometrics, we have this choice of either pooled data or split sample models. And here we've shown the results with both. And I think it's important to look at both types of results so we can get a comprehensive picture. And then finally, and that depends very much on the type of data that you have, but one difficulty that we ran into was to really identify what energy sources went to which usage, right, to identify clearly what is affecting temperature settings. So that's something to consider when you design your survey or when you analyze your result. So thank you very much. In the last slide, you find my contact information. So if you have any questions or if you would like to work on this kind of topic together, then please get in touch with me. Thank you so much.
For that, it was very enlightening. It was quite also different methodology. So we have compared actually 4 different approaches. This was based a lot on econometrics, and indeed the problems of allocating the energy used to the, it's always difficult, and we see it also in the other studies. Now, if there is, as I see, there is no Q&A, which means that indeed it was for intense, let's say, analysis of the various methods used. There are some few things from Didier. The one is the results are very surprising concerning the adoption of behavioral energy saving measures. In France, the yearly panels barometer of 10,000 households, the adoption of these measures surrounds more than 75%, not 5% as it was shown. And yeah, this goes from Hongguang, I think, presentation. And the last one, the next also question is, what's the motivation of the Chinese university to carry out this benchmark? So, okay, that's an interesting one. So, Hongguang, if you could just comment on the first one, that because there's quite diverse numbers on that, based on, for example, the French case study.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you speak?
Yes,
question?
The results. For France, it was the first question, saying that they were surprising concerning the adoption of the behavioral energy saving measures. They have panels in France with 10,000 households, and the adoption of these measures surrounds more than 75% for the energy saving, so not 5% as you showed. I don't know if Didier is still with us.
Yes, I am here, and I confirm what I say. Even when we make, when we ask this household for sufficiency measures, like heating to, let's say, 18 or 17 degrees, the level of adoption is still very high. So your number are, for me, completely out of scope, to be frank. 5%, it's impossible, and it's what all the measures which have implemented for the new crisis this winter show a lot of impact which are really out of your scope. So I really don't understand your numbers.
You mean the behavior saving measures set the temperature to 20 degrees Celsius
For
or below?
instance, yeah, we are in France, with a panel of 10,000 households every year. So it's not a sample of 400 people. When we ask that question, they say the level of adoption, it's about 80% for going to 18 degrees, which is even more, let's say, stringent than 20 degrees. So I really don't understand your 5%. And I suppose my colleagues from Europe will confirm that. If it's only 5%, we can close the door.
Actually, the survey data is from Maastricht University. But yeah, because we do some basic analysis for the questionnaire and the data, I think we can confirm that the data is correct, and it is could be used for the analysis. But sorry, I can't. No, I can't answer the question because I didn't take part in the survey process.
Okay, so let's do the following. As it's an important question to understand the logic of the calculations and that, and also the formulas that you've used. Maybe it would be nice if I can send back the question of Didier to you, and you can ask also your co-authors to come back with an analysis a bit on that. That would be nice to get a feeling of this large discrepancy of the numbers, just to be on the difference on the numbers, because that's important to understand.
No, but okay. Let's see it from your own point of view, because I'm surprised that nobody react on that. I mean, 5%, it's not possible that only 5% of the European household accept to change their behavior for just for 20 degrees. So you should be surprised too, not only me.
Yeah, no, I agree. The number is a bit, it's different than what we normally would see on that. Yeah. Okay, so if possible, we will send you this the question, and you could reply to us back. That would be great if we could have a clear understanding of that, of how it's being calculated, just to be sure that we are all on the same line. All right. Okay. In any case, the output of that will be kind of a two-pager coming up from us with the analysis of the methods and just representing to you that you can make use of, and of course link to the presentation. But it would be nice if you've got more questions, as you know, it's something that we need all to test, and all these methods would be nice to start testing in our own countries to see what we could get out. So the yes questions, we send it out, and also if there are more questions coming back from you that you attended, please send it back to us, and we can come back to the speakers and and to move on with more explanations on that. Okay, thank you for joining. I hope it's interesting. You see different approaches on how to tackle a split incentive. It's not a simple matter. It's very difficult. That's why we have very few data. Apparently, it justifies a lot of things. Why we have not carried out such analysis in most countries. Still, that's a good point to start working on that, because it's going to be quite crucial to come up with some realistic numbers in all our countries in order to design all these new energy efficiency policy required under the new ED, also the Article 8 and also the other articles of the ED. And even we deal with energy poverty, because it's going to be even more and could be even worsening conditions if we don't have accurate data in the analysis we carried out and the policies that we implement for the future to address and to combat energy poverty. Thanks a lot. You will receive from us the two pages, and we wait for more questions from you to come back to the speakers so that we can read up. Have a nice day, everybody. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.